Good evening. I'm calling the Monday, December 11th, 2023 Planning Commission meeting to order. Will everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everyone. Sorry about the delay starting this evening. First item on the agenda is the approval of tonight's agenda. Do I have any requests for changes to the agenda this evening? Seeing none, entertain a motion to approve the agenda. I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
A second to approve. All those in favor of approving the agenda say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Agenda is approved. Moving on, we have the approval of the minutes from the meeting held on Monday, November 13th, 2023. Any concerns about the minutes or requests for edits? Seeing none, I entertain a motion to approve the minutes from that meeting.
So moved.
All right, a motion. Do I have a second to approve the minutes?
Second.
And a second. All those in favor of approving the minutes say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, minutes are approved. Moving on, we have one public hearing this evening. This is for Aldeveron, a request for a planned unit development concept review on 23 acres, planned unit development district review with waivers on 23 acres, and a site plan review on 23 acres. Will the proponent of the project please come forward? Good evening. If you could state your name for the record and please tell us about the project.
My name is Lance Moneylaws. I work for Aldeveron. I'm the Director of Industrial Project Management. I'm located in Fargo, North Dakota. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the Planning Commission. It's my pleasure to introduce you and Eden Prairie to Aldeveron. Aldeveron is a leader in biological science. We are a contract development manufacturing company providing services for scientists around the world with essential components to accelerate research for groundbreaking science and breakthrough discoveries. It is our mission to provide products and services that make meaningful contributions to biological science worldwide. Looking at this map right here, I wanted to point out the locations of our current footprint and point out the fact that Eden Prairie would be nestled kind of right in the center of all three of those, so that would be ideal for Aldeveron. Aldeveron is a US-based operation supporting cell and gene therapies globally. Each one of these locations is a purposeful location for a specific type of manufacturing that we do. The headquarters in Fargo would be our research-grade GMP manufacturing. Both Aldeveron Lincoln and Aldeveron Madison are providing different types of research-grade manufacturing for Aldeveron.
I'm sorry, would you mind just pulling your mic a little closer? Just
Sorry.
pull it down towards you a little bit. Yeah, thank you.
Is that better?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Okay, so why Eden Prairie? Eden Prairie provides Aldeveron a site location with many, many benefits. We have access to educational institutions, labor markets for creation of jobs and fulfill our hiring needs. It offers a convenience to the Minneapolis-St. Paul Airport, which provides us face-to-face encounters with our clients and future customers. And it's also a centralized location. If you remember the map I showed you, it's a centralized location for all of our facilities to kind of come to one location. The Eden Prairie expansion includes scope to expand capability as well. The building addition will provide a state-of-the-art modern clean rooms within the new facility. The renovation to the existing building will provide laboratory and warehouse needs for our operations. We'll improve the site utilities and other site improvements to support our campus. And then the renovation of the existing building would be to allow for additional offices and administrative areas. From here, I'm going to hand off to Jackie Peck, architect for BWBR.
Thank you, Lance. I'm Jackie Peck with BWBR. So we'll get into the presentation here. We are at 7075 Flying Cloud Drive, which is an I-2 zone property. The building was originally built in 1982. So a handful of the previous tenants was Best Buy, SuperValue, most recently Blue Stem, and it's been vacant since about 2019. So we're excited for moving in and starting to have a presence in that site. We are proposing an addition on the northwest corner there. So we've got the existing building, that proposed addition, which is in what is currently a lot of impervious area, so that's parking area. It wouldn't be displacing that many trees in this corner. So again, it's a 2-story addition. And we are also going to be renovating and recladding the existing building. With the light rail, the Golden Triangle Station that's coming in, we do have a pedestrian route planned from the light rail station to the entrance to this building. And then also just part of the site improvements is a new stormwater pond, and then new trees, shrubs, and really bringing that parking lot into compliance. So right now it's just all asphalt, so we're bringing in a number of parking islands and trees into that parking lot to bring it up to the city code. There's a number of sustainability items that we're incorporating. Right now we have 7 EV charging stations, which will, provide charging for about 14 different vehicles. We are increasing the structure of the addition to be able to be solar ready. So that includes, making sure that we have the raceways in place, panel space within the building to be able to accommodate that. We're also going to be using energy efficient fixtures, equipment, all of that, daylight sensors. I think the biggest thing that we're doing is we're reusing the existing building. So that is going to come into play for our carbon footprint there. So let me walk you through a couple of our renderings here. This is the main entrance along the west elevation. You can see this is part of the existing building that we are recladding, but putting in some metal panel, kind of bringing some more prominence to that main entry so that it's more visible as you approach the site, with more curtain wall there. Walking around here is kind of the main staff entrance. So this is kind of the intersection between the existing building and the addition there. So you're seeing a pop of color with our metal panel. We've got bronze, orange, and white metal panels throughout. And then the addition that has precast, so kind of a darker precast with white precast, and then curtain wall there. And then pops of color as well. And then coming along the northwest view. So again, that's a part of that addition. And you can see some screening on the roof for some of our mechanical equipment that's sitting up there. And then coming to the southeast view along the light rail, that is part of the existing building, which we are proposing to paint and kind of in some patterns to provide some visual interest along that light rail experience. So for today, there are a handful of planned unit development waivers that we wanted to talk through. The first one is parking. There currently are 748 parking stalls that are required per the city code counts. After we put the addition and then bring the rest of the parking lot up to code by adding islands and everything, we are at 669 parking stalls. We did have a traffic consultant on this project who ran through some of our numbers. This project, day one, is anticipating 500 new employees. Part of that is shift work. So at day shift one, we have about 420 employees and up to 15 visitors that would be on the site. So within those numbers, we feel that 669 parking stalls would satisfy the building needs. We are looking at a waiver for the building height. In I-2, the maximum height is 40 feet. We are asking for the west facade to be, allow that to be 42 feet. Part of that is just how that average grade plane is calculated. We do have a bit of a slope on that west side along the addition, so that kind of, it still looks like it's 40 feet, but when you calculate it 6 feet out from the face of the building, we're getting to about 42 feet. We also have a waiver for the shoreland impervious area. It is a previously developed site. That existing condition is 64.2% impervious. We are actually bettering that by 0.1% to 64.1. So again, we are building on the previous impervious site and not trying to add more impervious area. And then our last one is the building material. So knowing that in I-2, the city code says that 75% of each facade should be Class 1 materials. We are asking for a waiver to allow less than that 75%, and we are proposing to use a metal panel product for most of that. So within the east facade is currently compliant. It is the south and west facades that are super close. They're 74% of Class 1. And part of that is because we are dealing with the existing building there, so we are not able to bump that up to the 75 due to our constraints with the existing building. But we're taking the curtain wall, we're replacing the curtain wall in kind. We're actually adding more curtain wall to some of these facades, and then the addition itself is, if you just calculated the addition, it is above that 75% for Class 1 materials. It's mostly that precast and curtain wall. And so then our north facade is probably the one that has the most variance. We have 57% Class 1 materials and 43% Class 2 materials. That is largely due to the existing building loading dock area and all of the screening that we are trying to provide there. So we've got a bit of metal panel architectural screen wall for the loading dock, for the electrical equipment that's sitting on grade, as well as the mechanical equipment that is sitting on top of the addition along that facade. And that, I believe, is it. So,
Thank you.
thank you.
Any initial questions from the commission? Yeah, Commissioner Reddy.
Hi, Jackie. Would you mind just going over what the main Class 1 and 2 materials are in the building?
Yeah, absolutely. Our main Class 1 material is precast, and then we also have curtain wall that we're utilizing. In certain areas, we have a cast stone slash precast base that we're adding to the existing building, but then our Class 2 material is metal panel.
Okay. And what can you just describe for people who are not familiar with the terminology of, like, what do you mean by precast? What is that? Fake stone? Is it just concrete, textured concrete? What does that mean?
Yeah, it's Yes, a textured concrete. So it's they call it precast because it's cast off-site and then brought to the site and put in place. But it is a concrete material with a exposed aggregate, which is a Class 1 material.
Thank you.
Other questions right away? Mr. Chair? Commissioner Fart?
We didn't get any floor plans with the packet, but on your site plan, I noticed that the existing office building in the southwest corner is going to be connected to the addition where you're doing the manufacturing. But it looks like that courtyard behind there still survived and maybe going to put some patio and trees in there and things like that. So
Yep.
how are you going to get your utilities in and out and things like that? Is it a covered walkway or is it an enclosed?
Yeah.
With foundations?
Yep, so that is something that we are working with the City of Eden Prairie Building Codes Department. But we are rerouting most of the utilities that are coming into the site. Rather than having them come into where they currently are, we're having them come to the north side of the addition. So there's some rerouting of the site utilities through there. It is considered I believe, a courtyard. So we're working through exiting with the building codes folks there to make sure we are compliant.
Okay, thanks. Second, the entry gates, I noticed that you're going to try and keep the people using LRT from using your parking lot, and that's fair. But it looks like the gates are just really close to the curb. So with the number of people that you're coming to the site, especially with manufacturing where there's shift workers and it's pretty much a peak demand flow during the morning rush and evening rush or whenever they come to work. There's not a lot of stacking distance between the entry gate and the curb for cars to stop, show credentials, wait for the gate to open, pass through, close the gate, you get it. So even though you have 3 curb cuts, I just don't see how that's not going to spill out onto the public way.
Yeah, good comment. So as you noted, we have 3 curb cuts that have 3 security gates. We do have upwards of 40 feet from the curb cut to the security gate, which would allow up to 2 vehicles to queue there. And then the intent is that all employees would have a card access. So, hopefully it's something that they can tap in and get in pretty quickly. We would have guest parking at only one of the locations. I'm trying to, the west one, so.
So there would be an intercom then, and they would hit a button and wait for the,
Those are some details that we still need to work out, but yeah, the intent would be that guests would be able to come to the site and then get directed and the parking all squared away.
okay. And you guys feel comfortable with that?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. So my third comment, I guess, is the elephant in the room about this shelled space. So you're talking about 152,000 plus square feet of space that's not been included in the traffic study, not been included in the parking counts, and you don't have any more room on site to park cars because of your 30% coverage limit. So I did my own math because you didn't, and it was over 430 cars required for that if you use those same proportions that you have in your letter. And so that means a parking deck. And I didn't see any accommodation on your site plans for a parking deck. You've got utilities running all through the site. And so you're not trying to avoid anything. And so I need more than that. I need to know what you're planning on doing with the proof of parking plan, how you're going to address the deck, what's it made of, what are the setbacks, all that good stuff. Even though you don't know exactly the square footage of what's going on to the addition, we can't just ignore that.
Yep. So this did come up during the planning review process with the city. So you guys are in sync there. The proportions of the shelled space would not be the same proportions as the whole program. It would be pretty much largely manufacturing. So we did some rough counts there because the officing would still be, we have what we're putting in for officing today would accommodate a future expansion. What we're putting in for warehouse would also accommodate some of that future expansion because we're trying to pre-plan some of that into this. But that shelled space would be more manufacturing, which is a lower per person count. We also looked at some staffing models of what that would be. So it would be similar to what's going into the addition for manufacturing. And so this could be something that we'd have 80 to 100 more employees on site with that build out of space. So I think in talking with Jeremy and his team, we acknowledge that when that gets built out, we do need to come back and talk through that parking. So.
And I can speak to that a little bit more when we get to my report.
Thanks, Jeremy. Thank you.
Thanks.
Appreciate it. Nice design, I like it.
Thank you.
Initial questions, any others? Okay, thank you.
I actually have one
Oh,
more,
yeah,
sorry,
Commissioner
I forgot. As it relates to the shell space, can you describe, since I'm not seeing the floor plan, where in the building that would be?
Yeah, it is, I don't know if we, yeah, there we go. If you see that G of the building, it's gonna be that portion, so kind of that lower portion of the building, both first and second floor.
And I presume that, so you're building a 96,000 square foot addition, but you have 150K that's shell. And the reason you're not just building that out is because the ceiling heights don't meet your requirement for the manufacturing space.
Correct, yep. So the type of manufacturing that is going into the addition, we did do quite extensive studies of how to reuse the existing building for that, and found that we would have to essentially demolish the entire second floor, demolish the roof, put in another secondary structure to be able to get the clearance height that we needed from a floor to floor to support this. The type of manufacturing that would be going in the future would not have those same head height clearances. So.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thanks.
Jeremy, would you like to take us through your report, please?
Yeah, the applicant did a good job of already kind of noting the waivers, and I'll get to those in a moment, but there are 3 requests on the table tonight. One is a PUD concept review. The other is a PUD district review with waivers, and then the site plan. And those waivers, as mentioned earlier, are parking, building height, shoreline impervious, and then the building material. I'll take the easy one first. The shoreline impervious, 64.2 to 64.1 doesn't sound like a lot, but in the site of this size, they dropped 1,000 square feet basically of impervious surface. And this area is in the shoreline because of 9 Mile Creek on the really southern edge of the site. And so most of the work is quite a ways away from the true shoreline impact would be. But they do drop the impervious surface a bit, and that's what we look for, try to get better as development occurs. The building height, as the applicant had mentioned, they are asking for 42 feet where 40 is the limit. The 42 feet, the 2 feet based on the length of this building and based on kind of the slope changes throughout that length of the building will be likely imperceivable. So you're not going to see a huge bulk or huge mass that impacts the streetscape or the neighboring properties. So we support that building height waiver. The parking, and Mr. Farr, you hit the nail on the head. We did look at how to handle that shell space pretty thoroughly. Typically, we see a flex industrial building or a flex commercial building. We don't know what's going to go on there, but we make assumptions because we know something's going to happen there. This is a little bit different situation because it's not truly flex. It's not like they're holding it and they're going to lease it to another tenant. It's not accessible from the outside area. It doesn't have its own entrance. It's not finished. It's not conditioned. It's just kind of held there, as the applicant said, because it's cheaper to build a new building than it is to tear down this new one or this existing one and add on. And so while it may be used in the future, we felt comfortable addressing the parking requirements based on those known issues at that time. What is the space going to be used for? Is it going to be office? Is it going to be manufacturing? What are the parking requirements at that time? Because we don't think it's 6 months down the line. Could be years down the line. And then what are other environmental factors? Environmental being the light rail station, other modes of transportation, ride sharing. How are those kind of how do those kind of come together to create a real number from a parking perspective? And we felt it's more appropriate to handle it at that point versus having a waiver here for, let's call it, 900 spaces or whatever those numbers happen to be, and then it just doesn't look right, it doesn't feel right, and I don't think we're better served by doing it that way versus looking at it at a later time. So that's why we felt comfortable handling this a little bit differently than we've done other projects. Still need a waiver, and likely the project will require further review. The development of the shell space will require further review, likely a waiver, or at least a public review at that time. But we felt comfortable handling it that way. So that's where we're at from the waiver and the shell space situation. The building material question, we went through several iterations with the applicant in terms of trying to get the building to be consistent with our code and our goals. And what I've learned in the short period of time here is it's hard to kind of morph an existing building to today's standards without completely destroying the bottom line in terms of the goal and something happening. So what we tried to do is identify the key kind of components to the design process, the building articulation. They meet that after some revisions. The east side, while it's existing, does exceed the minimum requirements in terms of the 75-25%. And the south and the west side, while they're very, very close, we didn't see an obvious location where you could take away metal and add a class 1 material, windows or brick or what have you, because we felt that the two kind of components, the existing and the proposed, really tie well together. So that's from our perspective, from the planning's perspective, why we support the waiver in that situation. On the north facade, which does face the train station, we looked at it very carefully because obviously right adjacent to the train station, right adjacent to West 70th, we paid special attention to the impact that would have visually from people leaving the train station and entering the community in that area. They did add landscaping that we asked for. Not that it will hide the building. It's a large building, tall building. It's not going to be hidden by landscaping, but we did try to soften it based on what's there. The screening wall that screens the mechanical equipment on the kind of the northern level or the topmost level there. Kind of the options we considered was the screening wall, the metal screening wall that they proposed, or just extending the precast panel all the way up to the top. We felt that would be not as beneficial to the community from a visual perspective, as it does look heavier, it looks more bulky, and the metal does add a little bit of life and variety to that area. I do want to kind of revisit the parking numbers, because what the applicant suggested is the screen wall on the grade is part of that computation, and generally screen walls at grade don't count as part of the wall, so we'll confirm those numbers before it goes to City Council. But staff is comfortable with the waiver for the building material on that north side because of the uniqueness of this area, because of what we're trying to achieve as a global project. And then also just we feel that the material variety and the color variety they propose do support the overall kind of mission of the design standards there. As I said before, kind of throughout, staff does support this project based on the 3 applications requested in the waivers, and is recommending approval subject to the conditions that are outlined in the staff report, some of which we asked that would be addressed before the City Council meeting. So with that, I stand for any questions.
Thank you. Any questions for the city right away?
Mr. Chair?
Commissioner Fry.
Okay, so just to get a little clarification on what you said there, Mr. Barnhart, about the, especially the north elevation, which has the 50% Class 1 material instead of 75%. Were you suggesting that the applicant's proposing screen walls to screen the loading dock area, which I think is fantastic? And so is that going against them? In other words, are the non-conforming percentages mostly in that loading dock? Is that what I heard, such that maybe the north elevation of the addition is close to complying? And I don't want to put words in your mouth or the applicant's mouth, but if they're screening something that's non-conforming and you can't really see it all that much, I'm not going to be all that much bothered by it, right?
I just want to verify before it gets to the city council, because if you can see on the rendering here, it's not a perfect picture, but on the kind of left side of your screen, you'll see two kind of lower orange walls.
Yeah.
Those are at grade, so I wouldn't necessarily consider those part of the building. So that may, if they're metal, that would go against their calculation if they did include it in the calculation. I just want to verify that. Jackie can help us.
Yep, and I can verify that we did include those screen walls in our calculations. So,
Okay,
Okay, so screen walls, and that might be part of the confusion that we've had kind of through the process. So there's a screening wall on top of that orange band on this view here.
Yep.
And that's screening the rooftop equipment. That is counted as part of the, because it's on the building.
sure.
Whereas these other ones, we have to double check and verify, but these are on the ground, so they're more like a fence type thing.
Sure.
And it wouldn't necessarily count against that. So we may get some benefit on the number perspective as we approach council, but let's call this the worst case scenario, the
Yeah.
57 to 43. And our goal here is the variety. There's a number of windows, there's a number of indentations within the panels, there's a variety of color. We have a darker brick or a darker paint color, and then we have the metal, the orange metal, and then the lighter colored metal above, which is perforated, which again adds a little bit of texture visually. We seem to achieve kind of the goals without hitting those exact numbers, but the worst case scenario is 5743 right now.
Sure, okay, I think they did an outstanding job with the variety of materials and screening of the units, and like you said, the loading dock, the numbers don't concern me as much as what they're doing, so that's great. My second comment was just a follow-up, maybe with staff. Mr. Schultz, if you could comment on my observation about the lack of stacking distance at the gated entrances, and especially in light of the fact that the traffic report talking about traffic volumes and peak hours is only for the day one scenario, not the additional traffic after the shelled space is occupied.
Correct, yep. Thank you, Chair and Commissioners. You're right. So when they looked at the traffic study, they looked at the existing, just want to talk about the trips for a second and talk about the volumes. They looked at the existing condition, and then they added the 97,000 addition and did calculations on both of those. That second number was the whole building, including the shell space. So I want to clarify that. Maybe that was a misunderstanding, but so that included that. So that the numbers they did from a trip calculation standpoint included the shell space and the addition.
Oh, it did?
It did.
Okay, that's
So
important.
That's probably, so then you could essentially back that back out of there to the existing.
Yep.
If you take the shell space out and look at those numbers, if you look at that. In terms of the stacking, yes, you're right. It's close to the intersection. The Flying Cloud Drive section there is actually a 3-lane, and it's got a pretty lengthy turn lane there. So staff isn't certainly concerned with a few cars waiting in that turn lane if they had to get through that. And also, I would ask that the applicant, if there's an issue, express some information to their staff that maybe to use one of the other ones. Right, they have 3. West 70th, we don't expect to be exceptionally busy. And Flying Cloud Drive, actually the south of that intersection with 70th, has got the lowest vehicle to capacity ratio, which means there's lots of room there for extra vehicles to be on that space. So not a busy traveled roadway there. And so if there's a few cars in that turn lane waiting to get in that peak time, especially with the number of shifts they have kind of switching out, wasn't a concern from a staff standpoint.
Okay, thank you very much, appreciate it.
Other questions for the city? Okay.
I
Please-
have a
oh,
question.
yep, Commissioner Reddy.
Just on the parking. So you know, to me, I guess what would make sense in my head is to take the lowest denominator of parking requirement for the shell space and apply it, whether, I think that's warehouse, if that's the case. And then calculate that, and, at a minimum, I'd rather provide a waiver that included that sort of minimum, and then, still have in the development agreement when they remodel it, if they remodel into anything that increases that requirement, that they'd have to come back for that delta. But I'm seeing, based on the numbers, we'd be approving a 79 stall waiver, but, in my head, I'm like, it's probably more like 179, but I don't know actually what that number is. Did staff, there was some mention of 80 to 100. I'm not sure if that was the actual, like, what the actual minimum parking requirement would be, for the lowest parking stall required use in that space. Did staff calculate that number?
Chair, Commissioners, we looked at a number of different solutions to the parking question. The challenge we had is we didn't want to waive the requirement of what the parking would be when that shell space is developed or shell space is used. So we don't want to arbitrarily set it low. And so the option was, do we set it low now and then kind of protect ourselves if something happens in terms of how that worst case or the easiest case scenario in terms of the lowest volume of parking? Or do we examine what the true need is when that property or when that portion of the project comes through? And we felt that was better long-term, because just throwing out numbers, let's say if we applied the lowest use of that shell space, which let's call it warehousing, and it's 100 spaces. So we granted a waiver. So the parking requirement for this property is 669 spaces. We gave a waiver of 179 spaces. And a property or the project comes forward and they actually need those spaces. They demonstrate that they need those spaces, or we've demonstrated that they need those spaces. They have a waiver in place that says we only need 669 spaces, or whatever the number happens to be. And I think that backs us into a position where we can't correct something later, nor can we apply a number that's more appropriate at that stage. So that's why we're kind of holding the requirement here. We're just waiving based on what the requirements are today, and then we'll examine whatever those requirements are when that property or that portion of the project comes forward again.
Okay, appreciate the explanation. I think I still have some concern, that, even without the 150 being built out, we're 80 stalls short by code. And so where, like, that's basically saying we'd have zero room for any additional stalls. But, what would happen in reality is the applicant would come in and say, we've been open now for 10 years and this is how many cars we have and how many stalls open, and if they can show that they have enough room. Otherwise, the other option is a parking ramp. So I do think it's prudent to design at least part of the site in such a way that could potentially accommodate that in the future. And I think that's all I have to say on the parking.
If I may say, or add to that, Chair and Commissioners, one of the things we learned when we started applying the parking requirements for office buildings is just the general economy of the size of the building, the ratio went down. And so I think what we're learning based on what their needs are, and then also based on what the transportation engineers kind of study is suggesting with the different ranges of parking requirements, is a building of this size with this much office and this much warehousing, our numbers, while they appropriate as a starting point, aren't necessarily the final number. And I think us being, not saying flexible, but at least receptive to new information as we apply the parking requirements, gets us long-term a better location or a better place, because we're not just requiring parking that won't be used or likely won't be used. So that's why I feel we're in a good position with how we're treating it in this situation.
And so to confirm, the city code requires 5 per thousand, is that, or how? I saw some reference to a 4.7. What does the current city code require for office?
For office, it's a range based on the size. And
Oh,
so
okay.
based on the amount of office on this space, the ratio is 4.7.
Okay.
As you get bigger, the ratio gets lower.
And is there any plan to maybe bring that up in a future? Does staff think that's a code, something we need to address in the code down the road? Because I know this has come up a couple times, and it's a little off topic, but just for future
Chair,
discussion.
For office, you mean?
Yes, parking requirement for office, yes.
In office, it is in the code. And in fact, I think we just did a parking adjustment August, earlier this year.
We adjusted office.
We adjusted office. That was part of that.
Through Chair.
Commissioner Kurt.
Just one comment here that, you know, this facility is right next to a light rail station. And that, I mean, it was in the report, some discussion of percentage, but I saw two numbers in the various reports. One was a 10% number, and the other was a 20% number. And realistically, none of us know what that number is going to be right now. But it is another mode of transportation into this facility. So to me, that reinforces the idea of let's not lock anything down other than what we have today, because I think we're going to learn something between now and then. I think the company is going to learn what's it really take to run this place and how many employees do we really need. Not that you don't know that pretty well already. I'm not assuming you don't, but you're going to learn something. We're going to learn the impact of the light rail on transportation to work and back. Mm-hmm. And if it's going to impact any facility, I think it would be this place. So that to me reinforces, take it a wait and see. Let's do what we need to do right now and follow the staff's recommendations relative to waiting until the next shoe drops before we make any decisions on that.
Mr. Chair?
Yep. Commissioner Fart.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I couldn't disagree more with this discussion. I spent the lion's share of years of my career doing just this, which is establishing proof of parking plans. I'm not asking them to design a parking deck, but to establish a benchmark so that we know something about what they're going to be doing with parking. If my calculation using their percentages of office, manufacturing, and warehouse weren't correct, and the applicant in fact stated at the podium right in front of us now that she thought, no, it was mostly manufacturing, it's going to be there. Okay, well, we know what that number is, 3 cars per 1,000. 150,000 times 3, 450 cars. Okay, not too far off from what I thought before, but 450 cars. Discount 20% for light rail, I don't care, discount 15% for light rail. You've still got a chunk of cars that have nowhere to go. That's my point. And nobody's talking about this chunk of cars. I don't care if it's 450, I don't care if it's 350, I don't care if it's 550. They have no land to put it on. So either they're going to say, we're just going to warehouse it and no more parking. Or they're going to come to us and say, we need green space waivers, we're going to go back to the watershed district, we're going to have to increase our pond size, we're going to try and put more surface parking, and they're going to run out of room even then. Or they're going to say, shucks, we need a parking ramp. I guess we're going to have to move a bunch of utilities, and then we're going to come back in front of the planning commission and ask for setback waivers and, you know, what the impact is to the parking ramp to the neighbors and blah, 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 blah. So there's no mystery to how their other 3 facilities are employed with manufacturing. So I don't think there's any mystery in their minds about what the population of this building could be on whatever that is, day 1,000 or something like that. It's just that we haven't heard their plan for it. And for us to put our head in the sand on just letting it be what it's going to be in the future, not knowing how they're going to come back and ask permission to do what they want to do, I think that's our job here, is to future-proof these projects. And that's why we have proof of parking plans, so that there's a plan. Plans can change. Their plans could change, of course. I hope their business model grows and wish them all the success in the world and hope they have to build an office tower somewhere. But to not have a plan, to not be given any information whatsoever, about what their forecast for parking is and how they're going to attack it, we don't know how they're going to come back to us in 5 years. That's it. Showing a dotted line on a site plan to say a parking deck might go here. And we're going to make way for it with some utilities. So we've got a plan. Great, thumbs up, thanks. That's called future-proofing. That's their job, to future-proof for their client. It's our job to look forward to it so that we don't tear down another office building like just happened along 494 because there wasn't enough parking in front of it. Losing tax dollars. So I got to get off my soapbox now, but you can see how passionate I am about this. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Sure, of course. Jeremy?
Chair, Commissioners, I don't disagree with anything Mr. Farr said. The issue perhaps is what is the solution to when parking is needed? I think what we've learned in the recent past on some projects where we've had written into the development agreement, you will build a parking ramp if deemed required by the city. I don't think that's always effective. In this situation where we're deferring what the solution is to the future parking needs when that area is built or used is going to be triggered by the applicant coming forward with a plan to do what they want with that building or with that portion of the building. So it's not a city trigger solution, it's a applicant triggered solution. And that's and there's many different options. I mean, a parking ramp is maybe the most obvious, but we don't know what that is. We don't know what the delta is, but that will be triggered by the developer coming or the property owner coming forward and say, we need this space and this is how we're going to address the parking requirements. And that's the only real difference between whether we study it now or study it later is we'll look to the developer to say, this is how we're going to use the property. This is, and we can tell them what the requirement will be, and then they can have the solution based at that time versus now prescribing a solution. So that's all.
This is a public hearing. If anyone would like to come forward and speak for or against this project, please do so now. Seeing no interest, I entertain a motion to close the public hearing portion of this meeting.
I move to close the public hearing.
Second.
A motion for Commissioner Meddy and a second for Commissioner Kirk. All those in favor of closing the public hearing, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, public hearing's closed. Further discussion?
Mr. Chair?
Yeah, Commissioner Farr.
Let it be known, I really like this project. I like the applicant, I like the business in Eden Prairie, and I like everything about it except for, of course, what I just spoke about. Maybe a question to all of us, but maybe Jeremy has to answer this for us. There's 3 actions we're voting on tonight: a concept review, the district review, and then the site plan review. And most times projects come in front of us with this accelerated multi-approval action. If it was to be done sequentially, they'd first come with the concept review, correct? Yep, okay. And we'd be able to look at a concept like this, make comments, they tweak it, they come back for the district review and the site plan review. So maybe they're anxious schedule-wise, I don't blame them. But if it was a concept review, they've listened to what we've said, and we could give them concept review comments and delay the PUD district review and the site plan review until they come back. But that's just one option. There's no way I can vote for all those actions with no information about 150,000 square feet of parking demand on the site, but that's just me. So I just want to throw that out to you, and if that made sense to staff in terms of just the sequence of applications.
Chair. Just to address that question, typically we review the concept plan review and the district review with waivers at the same time.
Okay.
It's not generally 2 meetings or
Right.
multiple meetings. So, in fact, all of the PUDs that I can recall you've done them all at the same time. So I think it would be appropriate if either whatever motion is made, if you were to suggest a motion, it would likely suggest changes or whatever,
Right,
whatever you feel is appropriate.
right, okay, all right.
Say again, Jimmy, you would suggest either all or none, you're saying? Not the,
No, recognizing Mr. Farr has challenges with the proposal. We've written a recommended motion or motions for all three projects. If whoever makes the motion, if Mr. Farr agrees or not, or he can suggest a different approach to that motion.
gotcha. Okay. Other thoughts about, oh, yeah,
Yeah,
Commissioner Moody.
on this note, Commissioner Farr, just an idea that I'm having is we could move to recommend approval, concurrent with the staff report with the added condition that they provide a proof of parking plan prior to city council or something like that. And I know that would mean we're not gonna see it and know if we'd be satisfied with that or even know what that means in terms of how many parking stalls and whatnot. They'd have to work that all out with staff, but that's just one idea I'm gonna throw out there upon the table.
Other thoughts?
Trying to come up with one. I mean, you could perceive what we're doing on parking is kicking the can down the road.
Yep. Right.
And Mr. Farr, Commissioner Farr is obviously very uncomfortable with that. Now, the issue for me is that there are just a lot of variables here. A lot of variables, a lot of unknowns down the road, like, frankly, will they ever even do this? Now, we've seen a lot of hopeful plans come in front of this planning commission that don't come to fruition. So I'm still trying to actually come up with my perspective on this. I'm just kind of talking out loud right here.
Sure.
I am like Commissioner Farr, I'm a very strong proponent of the concept of what's going on here. Love to get this organization in Eden Prairie, love to get the jobs. It's exactly the kind of thing that I think fits Eden Prairie industrial aspect. I was talking with a friend literally today about, Eden Prairie having one of the strongest industrial communities of any of the suburban Minneapolis communities, having a strong industrial presence, which is a real positive for our city. So we got to figure out a way to get this to happen.
Yep.
And right now on the table, there's kind of the thing of take the risk of the future, recognizing it would be an unknown, kicking the can down the road, and allowing a future planning commission and planning team to fight that issue. Because the tools are there if, to force, to force a parking ramp. We could just flat out not approve anything without a ramp at that point in time. Now, it also makes it more expensive for the company to expand here in Eden Prairie. Or what is the question?
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Farr.
that absence of knowledge is what's under my skin. The fact that it was unaddressed. I think there's plenty of information that could have brought forth, but hasn't. Not out of ill will. I think everybody around here wants this project. We love your company, we want you here. So I'm sorry, I'm not trying to put a roadblock on this at all. So it's the absence of information, and it's to the core of what we do here, which is to help plan for future, and phased developments are not new to us.
We see phased developments all the time. We see dotted lines on site plans all the time. Future, future, future. They don't know what it's gonna be. It might be a different shape, might be a different height. But there's information there.
I'll kind of put my stake in the ground, and Commissioner Farr and I have worked together on this commission for a long time, and I have the utmost respect, but I would probably not take the same position as he had. I would probably, I would vote for it as it stands.
Sure, sure, that's fine.
Yeah.
Jamie,
Oh,
did you want to add something, Jerry?
Can I just add a little something? Speaking to the parking requirements versus what they need, I'd hope that the planning commission gets some comfort in what our parking prescription is for this space, this amount of space, excluding of the shell, is 669, I think, is what the number was. And based on their need and based on what they expect from a parking requirement, they're at 420 or 450, which is much less than what they have and what we require. So that's, again, partly why we're, and I hate the term kicking the can down the road, but I appreciate the thought. Based on what the requirement, based on what the need is down the line, what is going to be the requirement? Because I don't want to put a condition on any approval that says if you use the shell space, you'll need to build a parking ramp. Because I don't, and I'm not maybe suggesting you're saying that, but that's a fear. If we put that in the development agreement of what's the expected solution to whatever the parking requirement is down the road. And so that's why we're deferring the decision on that until we know more. And I do appreciate it's an unanswered question. And it's a unique situation. I haven't really faced it myself. But I recognize this is a unique product and a unique opportunity that we can address in the future without really any harm.
Mr. Chair?
Oh,
yeah.
yeah, so I do get it about the parking and looking at this down the future, but I think you answered it for me, Jeremy, is should there be any future development or expansion, the applicant still has to come back in front of the staff or the planning commission to have that discussion about how to improve parking should they look to expand further. Is that correct?
Likely, there definitely will be some city review,
Right.
depending on what the project is, but likely will require a public review because they're going to adjust potentially the Exhibit B plans or, portions of the development agreement. So I would be comfortable that 100% there's going to be a city review and likely it will be a public review.
So I'm in the same camp as my fellow commissioners. I think the applicant did a great job along with staff taking a look at this project and the expansion. And I too would recommend not to make any changes to the motion of what we're looking to do here tonight. I think it's a good project.
Commissioner Brady.
I'm gonna kind of ask a hypothetical here that I think we should acknowledge. So just doing some quick math, the shell space represents about 34% of the building, which is pretty large. It'd be a third larger if they expanded it. So the question is, if another development comes along that has a situation like this, and they had half the building kind of just set aside, and we said, oh, that we'll calculate that down the road. If we had, is there a portion that's too much where we would stop and say, no, you can't, because you can't just say half, or 75% of your building's going to be shelled and you're only going to provide parking for a small building and kick the can down the road for the rest. So, just wanted to throw out that 34%. I'm not sure where I'm sitting right now on this. But then counter argument two is, and I think Jeremy makes a good point, that I think this would be a different conversation if the applicant was anticipating to use all 669 stalls that are there right now, and they're saying they're anticipating to use 420. So there is a pretty large space left in what they're saying they're anticipating to use. And that with that buffer, that it provides some sort of buffer for that future expansion. And we'll know at that time truly if it is 420 or if it's 500, frankly, or if it's a 600. We'll be like, well, you got to add more than 20 stalls. You need 200 more stalls in. You got to build a ramp down the road. So, I'm seeing both sides of how this could go, but, I do think it is very odd to be kind of allowing, a third of the building to be shelled and just not count that and kind of throw that down the road, but.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Farr. I want to acknowledge to everybody that this could very well be a unique parking demand type of a building for them. They're buying this building and they could have a significantly less parking demand per square foot than what our ordinance prescribes. And that's fine. I'm not trying to overpark, add more asphalt that's not necessary whatsoever. But they haven't told us that. So if they would have come forward and said, we have some unique ways that we use our space. We don't need as many employees per square foot. We're buying this building. We don't need all the parking. We need the square footage. These are our calculations that we've used in the past. We've got 3 plants around the country. And so, yeah, we can draw a dotted line on the plan and say, yeah, if it gets sold again for an office building and I have all this square footage now, I've got 470,000 square feet of construct up here, then I can at least sell it knowing that they could put a parking deck over here. It's possible. I don't think they ever have an intention of putting up a parking deck. So nobody wants them to overpark it. Of course, nobody wants them to underpark it. Everybody's for just right sizing, and I'm for just right sizing as well. And if they don't know that yet, little changes can happen down the road. That's fine.
Can I ask you a question about your objection? Are you concerned that it might not be possible to add spaces or a parking deck in the future? It sounds to me like your biggest concern is the way the proposal was written.
Right.
So I guess I'm wondering if we've had projects come in where there's been approvals for expansions, additions, or future unknowns before, and we come in and those are on the table, but they've now been completely changed.
Mm-hmm.
So what's to prevent that from happening? Or what about more detail in the proposal would prevent them from coming forward, in 5 years and with a completely different plan?
Sure. I think the difference is that they're not showing a dotted line for more space in the future and then a relative dotted line for additional parking. They're buying a building, making it bigger, and so they already have the built square footage already there with no accommodation for parking. They don't have a plan, that's all. They just didn't disclose their plan for it. When we do, this isn't a speculative development, like Mr. Barnhart said, speculative is different than build-to-suit work, of course, but this isn't a speculative development where you don't know what tenants are coming in, but you know that they're going to be office or manufacturing or warehousing, okay? And so those percentages can be argued every which way till Sunday. But you still put up a parking lot for the building, taking your best guess. And you leave flexibility for the tenants to have a little bit more of this or a little bit more of that. So to your point, sure, could we wait until they know? The answer is yes. But then why couldn't we have foreseen that now so that if it happens to be a parking deck, I don't think any one of us here we'd be looking at other aspects of the proposal, setbacks, et cetera, et cetera. building materials, all those good things that come along with it. And maybe that review happens later. But they can't put up surface parking for it. And I think it would have just maybe been a whole lot easier if they would have just said, we're a unique user and we just don't need that many employees per square foot. And then, okay, fine.
Well, I'm ready to take I'm in the position where I would vote for the project now, thinking of the project as it stands today, and the onus is on the proponent to come forward in the future and find a plan that's feasible, and if they can't, they won't be able to use the shell space. So whether or not the plan was presented in a manner that was best for us to envision the future, I still think we're future protected from any sort of use that's not favorable. So I support the project as is.
Other thoughts or discussion, or people feel like we should just make a motion? Someone want to make a motion, or?
I'll make a motion. Move to recommend approval for a PUD concept review, PUD district review with waivers, and a site plan review, all on 23 acres as represented in the December 11th, 2023 staff report and based on plans listed in the December 11th, 2023 staff report.
For motion from Commissioner Kirk, do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second from Commissioner Weber. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed?
No, nay.
I have Farr and Meddy as no's. Okay. And no abstentions, correct? Okay. All right.
Mr. Chair, could I just add a clarification for staff or city council purposes on what I'm disagreeing with? And for me, it's more of just the administrative processes of how we're going about, allowing this shell space to not count. So ideally, I would have preferred to see this come in with a proof of parking, just so we know it's physically possible to build a ramp in the future. We don't know if there's one needed or how big it is, if it's needed. But to know that, I think would have been my preferred step on this. I do fully support this business. I think this is going to be a great use here, and I think the parking's going to be just fine for now. So I do support that, but just wanted to clarify my reasoning.
Thank you, Commissioner Meddy.
And Mr. Chair, for the record, Commissioner Meddy expressed my sentiment as well. I share everything that she said.
Commissioner Farr as well. Thank you. All right. Thank you. Good luck on the next step. And we appreciate the project.
Yep. Good luck.
Thank you.
All right. Do we have any planners reports this evening?
Chair, no, not today.
All right. Do we have any members' reports? Seeing none, I entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Meeting's adjourned. Thanks, everyone.